and having a good time. It makes me feel sad to have to cut you off, but we want Scott to have enough time. So, just briefly, I'm going to go through the format. My name is Beth Andes, and I'm a member of this church. Scott Sinclair is going to be presenting today, and we're going to give him about 30 to 40 minutes to tell us what he'd like us to know about him and his spiritual journey. Then I like to take about 1 minute and we'll just silently let the everything settle. And then while George takes the offering, we'll have time for questions. Because this is on YouTube, I will ask you to raise your hand for questions. I'll bring you the microphone, and that way both the question and the answer get on the recording. Okay. So without further ado, Scott Sinclair.
Thank you. And I also want to thank at the outset Beth and Dave for asking me to do this. I have never done this sort of thing before. Um, I actually wrote it out, but I don't like to be read to, and I don't like to read. So looking like this, I don't think that's good communication skills. Um, Part of what most of my religious journey has been with a denomination called the Community of Christ. I normally abbreviate it C of C. And if you've lived in this area for a long time, you may remember the earlier name, the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So it was a long name. And so finally they made it a bit shorter. I want to say at the outset, I'm not intending to be critical of that denomination or any other. So if it sounds that way, push back and say, hey, you blew it. Um, but I've met some pretty wonderful people in that denomination, and I would be less than honest to not recognize that and respect their perspective, although it is different than mine currently. Um, all that said, because of the fact that that church is so often associated, and rightly so, with the Utah Mormon Church, I thought maybe it would be a nice thing to do a little bit of a distinction between the two at the outset. So this is my digression. I am going to read this part so I can speed through it as quickly as I can, and then we'll get on to my story. I think it might be helpful to give a very brief differentiation between the CFC of Independence, Missouri, and Mormonism of Salt Lake City, Utah. There are books committed to this task, so this is just an introduction. The two denominations share 14 years of history between 1830 and 1844. Both are non-creedal denominations and are hierarchical, top down, in stark contrast to UU. Both include the Book of Mormon alongside the Bible as foundational text. Plus, there are some other so called revelations on which the two may or may not agree. Mormons accept another book called the Book of Abraham, or it's in their Pearl of Great Price, which CFC does not accept. After the death of Joseph Smith in 1844, a number of persons claimed the role of leader, with Brigham Young claiming the most support and moving to Salt Lake City, Utah. CFC over time coalesced around Joseph Smith's son and remained primarily in Missouri, Illinois, Wisconsin, and Iowa. Mormons famously supported polygamy and claimed Joseph Smith had embraced it. CFC denied both. But it's difficult to disprove all those women who claim to be his wife. What do you do with that? Uh, Mormons baptize for the dead, meaning baptizing a proxy on behalf of a deceased relative who might have been baptized if they were still alive. CFC eventually, yes, it's an interesting thing. It's a great summer job if you're a Mormon youth too.
Yeah, you get baptized
Yeah,
over and over.
CFC eventually rejected this, but primarily by just not talking about it, and it went away.
Mm.
Mormons are much more committed to dietary restrictions, such as avoiding coffee and caffeine, than CFC. I often depict the differences by saying my people were back drinking coffee, yeah, with the coffee cups, while the wagons loaded up and went to Utah. In general, the Utah Mormon Church is much more conservative with no ordained women, as far as I know, and they do not accept homosexuality in any degree. CFC do ordain women since around 1985. I have not kept current on CFC's official policy on homosexuality, but know that there are LGBTQ welcoming CFC congregations, but not all are. I hope this has uh, been a helpful digression to differentiate between the two. So, CFC much more liberal than the Utah Mormons. All that said, you can either say that I think I'd rather say I was pretty much born into the church. On both sides of my family, my mother's side of the family immigrated from Scotland, went up the Mississippi River, and were met at the dock at Nauvoo, Illinois, where the Mormons were at the time, by Joseph Smith. My father's side of the family, also very Scottish, but located in Michigan. Um, I have a great grandfather who loaned a horse and buggy to a very famous missionary in CFC to help him escape being tarred and feathered. His background was prior to that was Catholic, and he left all of his Catholic third cousins in Michigan and then moved to Independence, Missouri. So I was pretty much born into this, baptized around the age of 8, which was the minimum age. I'm looking at Dave smiling, and yeah, he knows this well. Uh, and um, Then my family moved to Little Rock, Arkansas when I was going into the 8th grade. I can remember laying in bed in Little Rock, questioning, should I believe all of this? The Bible, the Book of Mormon, all this, and it didn't have a compelling argument, but I knew all of my family and my heritage said this is it. So I just continued. So went to school in Fayetteville, Arkansas. I have a degree in electrical engineering, and during that time, Fayetteville CFC had a very small congregation, probably 40 or 50 people, and they were building a new building. I like to do things, and so I was very much involved in helping that. I was very introverted and shy up to that point in my life. I could tell jokes about that, but suffice it to say that's where I was. And I began to come out of my shell. I had some friends that kind of enticed me to sort of come out of my shell more, and eventually, I received a call to the office of priest in when I was in Fayetteville. Let me explain how this works. In the CFC, the pastor, at least supposedly through inspiration, identifies if a person should be called to a particular priesthood office. That might be a deacon, a teacher, a priest, an elder, and so forth. And it requires the acceptance of the person, in addition to taking some courses, and also a vote, a jurisdictional vote on some kind of level that we really want this individual to function in that way. So I accepted that. I think I was around the age 21, and I was pretty gung ho on this. I read everything that I could. Sometimes that gets one in trouble, and it would eventually a number of times hit me with that effect. But um, I would later be a pastor over in the Liberty Street congregation over in Independence at age 29. But in between those, I had a couple events that really sort of fixed me on religion in general. I was a resident engineer down in Austin, Texas, on a construction site, and at the time of my oldest daughter's birth, I was 25 at the time. My wife had had difficulty in the pregnancy. Our Holly was 8 weeks premature. When the doctor came out, he said to me, "With your permission, we won't make heroic efforts. That we expect your daughter may be physically handicapped and mentally handicapped." And you know, what do you do in those moments? A couple of elders from our church came and prayed, and within about 2 days, all those issues were pretty much gone. And Yeah. So it was a deeply personal and riveting experience. I'll get back to that experience a little bit later on how do you deal with that in a religious sense. And then another experience, I was 28 when my father died. He had cancer, and we had moved back to Little Rock because of that. And I was in the hospital room. I'd never seen a person die before, and his eyes had been sort of looking downward. And then at the moment of his last breath, his eyes looked up, they seemed full, and at the time, it just seemed to me that he saw something or someone that I didn't see, but it was like, whoa. And that too was a huge experience in my life. Now, I'll get both back to both of those stories, but both of them tended to kind of weld me into the track that I was on in the community of Christ and already being gung ho and trying to learn all that I could. Um, so eventually I was asked, I was in engineering for about 10 years, and then I was asked to be a sort of an executive minister over in Independence for a smaller jurisdiction. And uh, I decided to do that. And later on, I was asked to be the terminology at that time was I was going to be an appointee minister of the general church, which made me subject to being transferred all over the place. In order to do that, I needed a master's degree in religion, and I got that from Park University along with some other people. John happened to have been in that program at the same time that I was. Now, it's one thing to be an engineer and do calculations and draft stuff and that type of work, as opposed to writing long papers. One night, I was surrounded by the books that I was expected to digest and then write, and I had my assignments up on a bulletin board, and I knew when it was due, and I just thought, I can't hack this. This is not my background, not what I was used to doing. And with tears that night, I decided I need to get out of this program. But the next morning, the books were still there, due dates were still there, but something had happened in me. And Uh, I don't know how to fully explain that one either, except I was ready to go, uh, and and I got it done. So uh, that was Park University. Went got that master's. Did a lot of CFC history, and you begin to realize there's some dirty laundry there. That's exactly the terminology that it was
Yeah,
described as.
yeah.
And so then you're left wondering, how do you deal with this? And well, I'm working for him and I believe other stuff, so I'll continue on. So I did. I ended up being the pastor at Stone Church. If you've been to Independence and the kind of the shell temple, across the street from it is a big stone church. That's where I was at for 4 years. At this point, I had three small children, and it was a primarily older congregation. And there were literally people in the congregations who would point to my three kids and say, "Wow, there's three young people here." And so it wasn't particularly helpful for my family. I'll put it that
Mm,
way.
mm.
And so then, after being there for 4 years, I was transferred down to Tulsa, Oklahoma. There, I was over 11 congregations, um, initially as the financial officer, but these are all small lay pastor congregations, most of them like 40, 50 people, some more than that. I later became sort of the overall administrator on that. And during the time that I was at Tulsa, I went to Phillips Seminary. I got a degree in Master's of Theological Studies, which is one step away from being an MDiv. I didn't have all the pastoral counseling stuff. I'd already done some of that, and uh, I I had a restricted time frame to be able to complete that, and so I did it. And in the process of doing that, I did a course in Jewish Christian relations, I would later write a thesis. By this time, I was used to writing long papers and footnoting out the gazoo, all this stuff. Um, but I wrote it on the history of Christian anti-Judaism. That is a terrible history. Um, it is the teaching of disdain through Christianity toward Jews. It is not the sufficient answer for the Holocaust, but it certainly is a necessary part of why the Holocaust. In addition, I got introduced to a group of people called the Jesus Seminar. That is
Mhm,
okay. I see
mhm. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I've
Okay,
heard of it.
so yeah, so I became very familiar with that, and that was sort of life transformational also. I put a very human face on this human rabbi by the name of Jeshua or Jesus, not really sure uh, even how that was to be pronounced, and that began to work on my belief system along that line. At that point, I was transferred to Los Angeles, California. I had 21 mostly lay-led congregations there. I went in as the overall person in charge of those. And at that point, I was so enmeshed in process theology. Oh, I forgot to mention that. I attended an event in which there was a PhD in philosophy who presented the theodicy problem. I don't know if that rings a bell with anyone. The theodicy problem is if you say that God is all knowing, all loving, and all powerful, and yet evil exists, how do you square that? You could say, well, maybe God didn't know. And within Shintoism, often when you go to Japan, you clap your hands to wake God up because God might be sleeping. Would you say, well, God is mostly good or mostly looks for good, but not all the time? That's not very satisfying for most people. But the element the process theology worked on was the power element. It denied that God is unilaterally able to do anything, that the power of God is through persuasion. So, for example, uh, God, at least from process thought, is not capable of stopping a tree from falling on top of a car with people inside the car, but God might provide a persuasion, a hint that people could accept or reject to move their car before the tree falls on it. So that is not a for traditional Christianity, that is not a very comfortable approach. Uh, and we'll get back to that in a minute too. Okay, so I'm in Los Angeles. I have always, wherever I've been, I've tried to connect with other people of goodwill. In Independence, I was secretary of the iShare Utility Assistance Program for a while. I was with the Independence Ministerial Alliance in Oklahoma. I was in a group called RAD, Reaching Across Divisions, Black and White Ministers. So I tried to connect that way. In California, I was on the California Council of Churches for a while, and I was president of the Southern California Ecumenical Council for a while. Um, I'd done a lot of changes in my life, and I am sad to report that I went through a divorce when I was in California. At least part of that was that my wife and I could no longer connect on the religious level because I had made all these changes through Jesus Seminar, process theology, and so forth, and we couldn't really communicate anymore. And communication is the basis of a relationship. And yeah, enough. So a couple years after that, Cheryl and I met and married. We were both subject to being transferred because of our jobs, and we thought, okay, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. And we came to it. And then you evaluate each person's career path, and we decided to go after Cheryl's career path. Uh, we were eventually transferred. to Wisconsin. They did not need a appointee minister in Wisconsin. And so I went back to school and I got a PhD now in philosophy at Marquette. Now, the reason for that is that Marquette, it's a Jesuit university. If you come from a Catholic background, you may know that the Jesuits are normally considered the most liberal form of Catholicism, but process theology was way outside of them also.
Yeah.
And so I got tipped off that you're probably not going to get a degree if you go that way. So I switched to philosophy, a move that I will never, ever regret. I really wish that I'd had a good philosophy course in engineering. It it would have transformed my journey for sure. So went to Marquette. I ended up writing a dissertation essentially on process philosophy, comparing Alfred North Whitehead, who's normally given credit for starting that, whereas there was a guy by the name of Charles Sanders Peirce, an American philosopher, who was very close. I never found the smoking gun of plagiarism, but I sure looked for it because Alfred North Whitehead had free access to Peirce's writings, and there's some striking similarities, but no smoking gun.
Huh.
So after that, I began teaching philosophy first in Wisconsin, then in Cape Girardeau, and primarily in St. Louis. I taught Introduction to Philosophy, Ethics, Biomedical Ethics, and World Religions. Okay, now by this time, my theology, my religious journey had changed a lot. Let me go back to the incidents before the birth of my oldest daughter, Holly. I am very grateful and will always be grateful for her life, but I don't need a belief in God to be grateful for that. I have a fair degree of philosophical existentialism in me. We are thrown into the life and we carve out, we create meaning for ourselves. I can do that with a great appreciation and love for all three of my kids, but I don't need to necessarily predicate that on God and some kind of intervention in that way. Same way with my father, and this is what time has changed the way I've looked at both of those events. That was the first time I'd seen someone die. And now I'm told, and Beth maybe can echo this. At the time of death, there's a release of endorphins, there's a loss of oxygen, and probably what I witnessed can be explained very nicely with, and Scott too can probably confirm this, very nicely through medical changes that were going on. So once again, I cannot deny the power of what it did to my life, but I don't see that in the same context that I did before. And so, if I was to summarize this, in Fayetteville and early on in my engineering career, I was gun ho CFC, learning and reading everything I could. And then I began to disassemble my belief in Community of Christ or CFC because of various things. Later on, began to disassemble my commitment to Jesus as anything other than human. And finally, especially with the Odyssey and process thought, began to disassemble my need to believe in any sort of God, however one configures that. So that's basically where I was at. I'm teaching world religions, and that's a really good fit for me because I've got a religious background. I had traveled to Israel, I had traveled to India, I knew something about world religions. And when you go through most world religions in class, and I had atheists and religious believers in this. And as a good philosopher, it doesn't get any better than to just be the traffic cop and make sure that both sides are playing fairly with one another and bounce back and forth in discussions. So that's what I was doing. And when we came to Christianity, especially in discussion about the Trinity. Now, if we know something about the Trinity. Tertullian is the one who formulated this. That the word is not in the New Testament. Tertullian was later declared a heretic, but only after he came up with his Trinitarian formula.
Okay.
But trying to explain, well, it's sort of like steam and water and ice. It's three different forms, but it's all the same substance. And a lot of my students, they weren't buying this stuff. And occasionally I would have people ask me, well, what if you're from a Christian background, but you don't accept this Trinitarian business? And my stock answer was, go check out the Unitarians. That's what I would say. Now, it wasn't every day that would come up, but that's what I would say to people. So time went on. Cheryl played the piano in church, and so we continued to go to church a lot. I wanted to go with Cheryl, but eventually I was stepping away from it. I just had enough, and eventually Cheryl did too. And and at this point, I'll say more about being an atheist in a minute, but I was pretty much done with that, and so we stepped away from it. And but we both liked the sense of belonging and community, which is a part of churches. And so we decided, where do we go? Well, I decided to take my own advice. I I went to First Unitarian of St. Louis. Now, Unitarianism, I knew that that would be a good fit for me. I was not familiar with the terminology of Universalist part, so but once I discovered what that meant, well, I believed that for a long time. So that was not a difficulty. Near the end of going to CFC, I had great difficulty in even singing hymns because of the language in it, the God and the Jesus and the he pronouns for God. And so I was substituting words not always to the satisfaction of people around me. Uh, I tend to have a loud voice when I sing, sometimes on notes. Uh, but when I went to UU, I could sing every word.
All
Uh,
right.
and we, both Cheryl and I had grown up in the congregation in CFC. We knew people and relatives and all that. But this was like cold turkey. We didn't know a soul. And so we decided we would join the choir because we decided that's the best way to learn how to meet people. And so we did. It was a perfect fit for me because the three words that they used in St. Louis a lot, it's NBA. We nurture spirituality, we build community, and we advance justice. Now we say something very similar. It's a bit wordier, in my opinion, anyway. But but I can remember NBA: nurture, build, and advance. And so it was a good fit for us. We were loving choir, although they sang a whole lot more Latin than I enjoyed
Yeah.
singing in the choir there. And I'd gone on the worship committee, and about that time we decided that we should move to the Kansas City area uh, because of family and relatives. I have a daughter and granddaughter and a sister here. Cheryl has a niece with our nephew and with four children, and we have longtime friends. We had friends that hadn't seen for like 40 years, and so tried to renew some of those friendships. And so this has been a really good fit for us.
Cool.
And I continue to like NBA, but I also like what we've got on our statement about a people of goodwill and a people of service. And to me, that's what it's about. That I've always tried to make a positive difference and to do stuff. I during the time in which I was moving away from CFC and hadn't come to UU yet, I committed a whole lot of work to Scottish organizations in St. Louis. And I said to the games people, if you expect me to just talk for several years and not get the games off the ground, you got the wrong guy. That I want to do something. So I like the doing aspect of this. Now, if you were saying, okay, Scott, How would you describe yourself and theologically? I would say I'm a friendly atheist. There are some atheists, which in my opinion can be a little prickly. And but again, I've received so much love during the time that I've been in CFC. I cannot in good conscience do that. But on the other hand, um, I'm enough of a philosopher. I am impressed by Socrates, who was once told that he was the wisest person around, and he spent most of his life then trying to disprove that. And he finally came up with one conclusion. This one thing maybe makes me the smartest person. I know that I do not know everything because there's so many people that maybe we're very knowledgeable in one subject area, but don't know much about the other. But because we know this, we think we know that. So I would also put some humility in there. I know that there are people in this world that are a whole lot more empathetic and sensitive and aware than I am. And so I am open to what I affectionately call woo-woo uh, stuff that may be out there, and I'm willing to listen and hear uh, and try to learn what other people have to say to me. That's it.
Thank you so much. Okay, let's just take a minute and let everything settle. And while George is passing the collection, ooh, no, I'm fine. I was afraid I was going to knock it over. It didn't hurt. Anyway, if anybody does have a question, please raise your hand and I'll bring the microphone. Excuse me.
Mhm.
Thank you, Scott. And it's not really a question, but when you were talking about, what was it, NDA?
Mhm.
Um, and in our mission, because I was around, I was actually on the committee that was coming up with it rather
Uh-huh.
wordily, I would agree. But if it helps, it was originally known as BIC, Build, Inspire, Create.
Oh,
And so that makes it much easier for me to think of. The other thing in the realm of how to remember things. I don't know if you have looked at the UUA. There's the um, love is at the heart, and then it goes around that the six things. And I
yes.
never could remember those till somebody finally told me jet pig,
Jet peg.
justice, equity,
Transformation.
pluralism.
Equity.
Yeah,
No,
in
that's
in
I. And you know,
in inclusion and generosity, I think.
yeah,
So I'm definitely somebody who needs.
jet pig. That's very helpful. Thank you. And especially since I'm a Razorback fan, that the pig fits very nicely for me.
I'm interested. What took you to India? And where you mentioned another
Mhm.
exotic place.
Uh, on to India with, excuse me, my son. This was what, maybe 10 years ago. We f- uh, we flew in. Gosh, the cities are escaping me. We ended up going to the Ganges River. Went up, saw the Golden Temple of Sikhism. Uh, uh, Delhi, New Delhi, uh, Mumbai is the place where we went in and ended up coming through Kathmandu. Uh, Cheryl likes to say that this was a 3 week trip. It was really 2.5 weeks, but it snowed really heavy in St. Louis while I was gone, and um, there may have been an expanded vocabulary for Cheryl's description of me when she was dealing with all the snow. So, uh, but no, I've been to Buddhist temples, to Hindu temples. I, my granddaughter wants to do some stuff on world religions, and there is a Hindu temple over in Kansas. I haven't gotten there yet, but I intend to get there with my granddaughter. They had a really nice temple in St. Louis, but I've seen those in India, uh, and that's sort of a transformational experience going there. And then after my divorce, I gave myself a present. I went with some friends, Gina Reed Holmes, some of you might know, went to Israel, and that was a great trip too. Uh, so that just sort of informs me on some of those world religions and the Sikh Golden Temple. That was neat to go to. You take your shoes off to walk around it. And of course, as an American, I'm wondering, will I find my shoes again when I come back? And uh, so, yeah, yeah, those were the extent of my travels.
Scott, fascinating Odyssey. One thing you said is that you are into doing. And can you explain that more? Some of us are involved in the weapons plants. A few of us are going to get arrested out there this month. Some are involved in death penalty, poverty. But what are what do you like to do?
Was that dueling?
Do you said you are into
Oh, doing
DO.
things. Doing things. Uh, uh, well, I continue to do a lot of stuff in the Scottish community. I'm the vice president of the Kansas City St. Andrew Society, and I was that in St. Louis also, and I ran the Scottish Games over there for a couple of years. Uh, I I don't like. I've been when I was in the CFC. Occasionally, I was invited to be on a committee, and you just get together and you talk and you talk and you write a paper, and then the paper gets thrown away or put on the shelf and forgotten about, and that sort of thing. That has no appeal to me. But trying to do something. I'm thinking of David, um, and David's. There's all sorts of work around here. I've helped a handful of times, but that's the sort of thing that I like to do. Uh, I've not done the hot hunger outreach team yet, but that's on my agenda to try to get over and help on that occasionally. Uh, so so those would be examples. And Bob Miller's got me busy doing some stuff too. So and along with Bonnie.
Wow, that's a lot. Okay. That was really interesting. I really enjoyed that.
Thank you.
I appreciate your thought. So I am intrigued by it because I have a similar kind of a question in my mind. This whole the area where you talked about the woo-woo, for instance,
Yeah.
and I'm wondering, first of all, if some of the Greek philosophers, concepts of the prime mover, etc., might shed some light on that, or because I personally think it's there somehow, but I'm not sure where. But I'm wondering if you have some examples of where that might be an important reality that we need to keep in mind. And I also say that because I think maybe that's where Unitarianism started at first. I don't think it denied the possibility of some sort of divine presence or activity or whatever. So, I mean, that's a bunch of questions, but anyway.
Okay. Um, well, let me give you a couple of examples of what I have done. I'm not. I'm willing to go to channels. I've and readers, and I've had some experiences there that yeah, it didn't do anything for me. But I was in Sedona once, Arizona, and I went to a channel, uh, and that was before I'd gotten into philosophy. And she she said, some of the stuff is so generalized. You think, well, is it terribly meaningful at all? But she named it. She said to me, "Oh, you're going to be going into an area that you've always wanted to do, and it's philosophy." And that kind of woke me up a little bit. So so I'm into that I'm willing to hear it, but I'm also very willing to critique it too. Uh, uh, Process thought, and this was Whitehead's interpretation, was that in every becoming occasion there is a divine input, and which can be either accepted or rejected. Uh, and Whitehead would say that his idea of God is the source of all genuine novelty. And the idea is that in each moment we have memories of our past moment, and hopefully, if we have great sensitivity, uh, events around us. Uh, so that's all of our input. And if that's all the input we ever get, why don't we just do the same thing we've always done, just over and over again? I am a creature of habit in some ways, but I'd like to think I've got some new things popping up. So, is that a source of inspiration? Now, for Whitehead, he saw this as God, and he had a God shaped hole in his philosophy, and he called it God. But you don't have to believe that. You can be a process naturalist and say that novelty just occurs, uh, almost like Charles Darwin. And in each generation, there's this unexpectedness that comes out. Um, it's interesting. Um, I've been reading a book. Uh, I don't read a whole lot of Dan Brown, but I just got done reading his Mystery of Mysteries, and the whole notion, Secret of Secrets. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So the idea of non-local consciousness, we normally, or I normally assume, I'll put it in I words, that what I'm thinking is inside my skull. But is that really accurate? Are there moments in which we receive a inspiration from outside? The example that I gave of going to give up on a CFC that night, and the next morning I'm different. Is that a non-local consciousness that persuaded me? I don't know. And that's probably, the questions are more important to me than the answers on from a philosophy background. Yeah.
I think my question is going to overlap on that a little bit.
Okay.
So you've obviously changed a lot
Yeah.
from when you were a youth to now, and you mentioned dirty laundry, and I think of Cesar Chavez recently being bad things coming out, and some people might call coming to this church disillusionment, but it seems like you're much more of change and evolution. So how do you avoid the disappointment in a teacher or a disappointment in a previous line of thought that you held fervently um, affecting you now, avoiding disillusionment and really considering it to be evolution or change instead?
That's a great question. Thank you. Uh, there probably is a bit of disillusion in that because I've disassembled a lot of that stuff. But I'd like to think that the best part of religion is love. The best part is openness and connectedness, and that's why that nurture, build, advance, and in addition to goodwill and service. Uh, that's why that's so helpful for me. That I don't want to be fleeing one thing. I want to be attracted to the other thing, and this is what attracts me to you. Uh, Process thought emphasizes that everything is interconnected, interdependent, interrelated with one another. And that speaks of UU also. By the way, the UU Institute has a fairly nice course on process thought. And I got into the weeds more in my dissertation, but as far as a nice overview and get a feel for what process is about, the UU Institute's helpful. I've taken several courses through that.
I don't think I have a question, but
Okay.
you, fortunately for me, have put together some jigsaw puzzle pieces that have been floating around in my mind.
Okay.
We went to a master class at the symphony yesterday, and we've been to a number of them before. And it seems to me that music, like life, is a journey that changes you if you want to change. And so, as a musician, you learn about sustaining tone by watching an opera singer and figuring out how that breathing pattern happens. As a person, as you go through this journey, the things that you experience change you. Made me a better actor, made me a better teacher.
Mm-hmm.
The secret to that is the willingness to change and not be stuck in some pattern that you can't expand in. And if you don't expand, as UUA expanded by dumping the historic seven principles and saying, no, wait a minute, this is what we really meant, then you don't ever grow.
Well said. Thank you. I was once told when I was at CCC, I've forgotten, or CFC, uh, forgotten who said it to me, but he made the comment, I think, Scott, I've seen more change in you than anyone else, from being very, very conservative to liberal. And I'm not sure he meant it as a compliment at all, but I took it as that. And and certainly music, uh, because I was so active in other stuff, I always loved to sing. But I was only in a junior choir before coming to UU because I was so busy. I didn't think I should take additional time away from my family. So it's been a joy for me to be more involved in music. You may or may not know within Islam, uh, typically you don't sing. You might do a chant, but the idea is that you don't want to be carried away with emotion. Now, this is one of the critiques of philosophy in general that through the years, philosophers have uh, emphasized cold thought, divorcing it from emotion. And in and this goes all the way back to sadly Socrates that rational thought was male and emotion was female. This is terrible for both sexes. It's inappropriate. And I really think emotion is a huge part of what drives us forward. Why would I do almost anything in life if I didn't have an emotional connection with, I want to change something, I want to do something to make it better. So I think it's artificial to try to separate the two. And so to the extent that music conveys that emotion, yeah.
Do you find some of your engineering background having an impact on your ability to process and add new information to the solutions you're looking for?
I got to think about that one. It's engineers do you've got to analyze you've got to look at the situation and if you're going to design something from scratch you've got to think about all the options and try to I consider myself to be a pragmatist too that I want it to work uh, and to that extent yeah in my religious journey I'm wanting things to work, and I'm wanting the best fit. So I guess in general terms, I could say that. Frankly, I never really thought about that before, but I'll continue to ponder that on my heart. Yeah.
You're going to pray on it?
Well, I think I'll just ponder it.
Say one time, man.
Yeah.
First, thank you very much for sharing.
Thanks.
As a lifelong Unitarian, I enjoy listening to people's transition stories and how they came to us.
Mhm.
And no one's ever accused me of being a philosopher. Uh,
Yeah.
in all probability, I will have difficult spelling the word, let alone understanding what it means.
Yeah.
But it seems to me at the end of the day, this is a religion, this is a group of people who judge themselves when the rubber meets the road.
Yeah.
You know, it's not necessarily what you think, It's certainly not how you got here. It's what are you doing and how do you live it?
Yeah.
And how do you take responsibility for both of those areas? It's not something you can give away. I was mean to this person, but it wasn't me. No, doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
So welcome.
Thank you. And I sort of in broad terms, I have felt that this group is about doing things as opposed to pledging allegiance to some creed or even though CFC was a non-creedal church, by golly, we were hemmed in by our history. And I knew those boundaries very well. So it's not a belief, it's a doing aspect. Yeah.
Sorry, I have lots of questions. I have a question about so other religions, like for instance, have you been informed by them, like a Buddhist concept that life has changed? You know, the fundamental. Well, I mean, concepts like that. So how do you has that been influential on
Yeah.
your thinking?
I like Buddhism and I always enjoyed teaching that. Bob Miller made an observation several weeks ago to me, and I'd never really thought about it, but it was a good fit. He said, you know, Western humanism and Buddhism, they're the same. Now, yeah, now within Buddhism, there's a bunch of religious stuff that sort of gets in the way. Uh, but the basic idea, one could say that Buddhism is about impermanence. Where do you find security if everything is changing and impermanence? Within uh, the uh, Judeo-Christian tradition, you put your dependence on this God or Jesus. Within Buddhism, it's more within oneself that you find a center and you try to align yourself with humanistic values and valuing people and honesty and trust. Uh, so I see, although I never thought about it like Bob described, the more I thought about it, yeah, that's a perfect fit.
Seeing no hands raised, I'm going to do moderator privilege, and I really do appreciate a great job you've done. Um, so I too grew up in the CFC, although it was RLDS back then. Um, I kind of got disillusioned early on. It was a junior high camp experience, if you can believe it. But anyway, there you go. Some of us catch on a little quicker. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I agree. It's taken me a long time.
Yeah, no, so I really am kidding. Um, but I like the idea that that church has of modern day revelation, but also what you just said about in any situation, what creates the change? Is it a divine thing? Is it the global consciousness? And one of the most bizarre books in philosophies I've ever read is about how plants communicate. You know, the secret life of trees.
Yes.
And then I read about the first experiments that people started doing about because they found that playing music and talking nicely to your plants makes them grow better.
Mhm.
So, but does it work from a distance? And this guy went, he lived on the East Coast, went to the West Coast, thought about his philodendron. It was hooked up to monitors, no, seriously. And he thought, I'm going to kill that plant. I'm going to root it. I'm going to pull it out by the roots and everything. And the philodendron just reacted very violently.
Oh,
Yeah. So there's something, and I honestly don't know what it is, and I never discount experiences.
indeed.
So that's all I think I want to say about that, except what's your idea of modern day revelation? Does it come through people? Does it come through our inner voice? Is it real? I mean, is something trying to communicate with us, divine or otherwise?
My best and the short answer is I don't know.
Yeah, of
But
course.
The longer answer, let me give you an example. Uh, I have a friend who he's a COC minister, and he was in a distant place. I want to say Africa, but I can't recall what country he was in. He didn't speak the language, and so um, there's a tradition within COC that you would pray with people. And that's a lot of Christian churches have that tradition that you would pray with people. So he had three people come up to him and ask him for prayers, and he was trying to be in tune with them as best he could, and knowing that he didn't understand what they were saying, and they probably didn't understand what he was saying. Well, no doubt they couldn't understand, but he just tried to connect or resonate with them. And lo and behold, he had three different, I've forgotten the three. One person was having marital problems, and maybe there was health problems. I've forgotten the three, but he, I don't know how you explain it, but he gave them the information. Of course, did they hear it? Maybe not. But uh, he was right in touch with what their need was. Well, how do you explain that? Uh, em- Empathy, empathetic, trying to resonate with another person. I would count that as a form of revelation. Is such a loaded word. Uh, but I would point to those as examples of something that we can't quite explain. A universal consciousness would do a fairly good job of explaining that, I think. Uh, but I don't necessarily need an interventionist God taking care of this.
Well said. Yeah. Anybody else? Well, once again, let's thank Scott. He did a great job.
Thanks.
See y'all next month. Now you know why. And their Scottish connection. You guys are gonna be best friends. Yeah, actually. I still want to splash hot wax all over, you know. I don't, have you ever blown out a candle and then your whole candle is covered with hot wax? You know, it's like, hey, what am I doing? Yeah. That was a great idea, putting that there. I like it. Well, and it's, and we don't have, I mean, you can always light up, but you can try it. Yeah. I think when we do it Sunday, push it down. Okay. It comes straight. Yeah, because it's being, mindful. Yeah. It's right. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for not going, really? Nope. I mean, I was afraid I was gonna have to figure out how real quick. That was my panic. You know. Yeah, I would give you yet another job. No, it's all right. It's okay. Anyway, it's when and real parents for me and so in a village. Yeah, we got it in your phone. Lived in my phone. Yeah, yeah.
missiles.
Yeah. We still have chemical emissions down there.
They used to also be the silos.
Yeah.
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 Let me pick up it all.